Welcome to Karate Cafe, your source for martial arts conversation since 2005. And now, here's your hosts, Paul Wilson and Dan Williams.
Hey everybody, it's Paul. It's Friday. It's 3 Eastern, 1 Mountain Time. Time for yet another delayed episode of Karate Cafe. Off to my center line, actually directly on my center line in this case, my good friend and close personal friend, Dan Williams. Dan, how are you?
Hey, good. I'm doing good. How are you?
Just happy to be here. Finally, yeah, we had a few travels and travails and whatnot. We had to
We
kick it
did.
back a couple times, but we're still
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
because reschedule twice, get a schedule a third time or
Yeah.
some sort of nonsense.
You know,
Yes, I'm drinking water out of a white thing because no one has sent me any coffee mugs yet to drink my karate out of, or my karate cafe, I guess. What were
oh,
you going to
that's
say,
right.
Dan? I'm so sorry.
I was going to say that kind of folds into the topic that we were going to discuss today, in my opinion,
And
anyway.
and what is that topic?
Uh, Traditions in the dojo,
Hmm.
traditions in the dojo,
In the
and
school.
what in the school, and what maybe to keep and what to not keep.
Hmm.
And I think that as we've experienced it with this podcast, for example, we live in a modern world, right? Where we can't dedicate as much maybe of our lives as people have chosen to in the past, or some people do now, right? Like for us, we fully recognize that this podcast is extra for us. It's fun. We like to do it. But oftentimes life interferes with it. You've got family, you've got work, you've got so many things that come as a priority that are above and beyond, a hobby. Now, yours is a business. I know people with a business, and that is your business then, right? That's your work.
All right.
So it becomes a different priority. But for those students, right, there are, and we've talked about like different kinds of students in the dojo. And I think that there have been some schools that I've gone to where if you're not attending regularly, if you're not doing like after class events and things like that, you're made to feel guilty about that, right? Like these are the things that you should be doing, and you should be more than just like going to class and going home. I'm here to tell you, you can do whatever you want to do. It is you are trading instruction for money, just like you would if you were getting guitar lessons or any damn thing else, right? And so any guilt you have about not being more involved than you should be, that's on them, right? You have no obligation to your instructor other than paying them the fee that they have asked for teaching them, right? Other than
Hmm.
just being a decent human. I mean, you're still expected to be a decent human being, right?
That would
But
be, inherent in the
that
system.
right,
Home
that would
prison.
be an assumption, right? But other than that, like if they're moving dojos or something like that, and you're not available because you have a family function, you don't need to help. You're not obligated to help them move dojos or clean up or do any of that stuff. You're paying them. That's the idea, right?
Right. All right, so that was a good episode. But with no, you know, I'm of two minds on this.
Hmm.
Being a highly desired and well-respected martial arts instructor myself, um,
World, no. Let's not.
the the yeah, so to be clear here, and this is one of the things we were talking about in the green room before the show, uh, is this isn't just you kind of went to the heart of it. It was like it's I don't want people to think it was like the traditions of uh, passed on from past masters down through the generations and blah 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 blah. This is, I mean, any kind of tradition.
Yes.
And I've been to many dojo, uh, you know, and in general and on the road shows where like you'll be talking about to the instructor or somebody in the dojo or the school, and they'll say like, oh, we kind of have a tradition around here of, and so it's part of the culture of the school, and I think every uh, school system, style, etc., has their stuff kind of baked in,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the stuff that kind of happens on the fly. you know, there's been all the stories. I was talking with my senior one day about doing something. I don't know what it was about doing something that I just didn't feel like doing at the dojo. Like something administrative task or whatever. And he was kind of like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that," or whatever. He was like, "I pay money for that," or something like that. And I said like, back in ancient Okinawa,
Right.
it's like people, the students used to like chop wood for their instructor and like bring
Yeah.
them water in, and they didn't,
Yeah.
and just to
Paint the
learn.
fences, wax the
Yeah,
cars.
and I think there's merit to that. I think there's a
I
strong
do.
sense of like uh, because again, I have clearly my business model is profit adverse to teaching. I would love to make a lot of money teaching martial art, uh, or at least a living wage. I would love to have extra cash to walk around because I teach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but from especially from an Okinawan perspective, Okinawan martial artist perspective, uh, that, and this is a long way around the barn, but to address what you're talking about is like is I don't think like martial arts were monetized. I was talking about this with somebody the other day, relatively recently. I don't think that, especially pre-World War II, especially, there were a ton of professional martial artists. There were people who did martial arts, did it as their family, did it as part of, uh, their training, did it, but they didn't get paid. And then, in Okinawa specifically, after World War II, it was like that was a way for them to make money because the GIs and stuff were there. And then, somebody in Korea made money on that. That got exported to the United States, and Americans being super happy to drive something into the ground, it became a business model, right? And so, instead of uh, so the traditions, I think, that kind of got wrapped into, the traditions were there as sort of a veneer of a way of making money, So when we talk about traditional martial arts and traditional training and da da da, when I talk about it, I think it much more of the ethos of, um, not necessarily like hard training, more practical training, stuff that's less wrapped in the glitz and glamour of being looked at. Anyway, so so I think some of the traditions practiced in the dojo when you're talking about that is, you know, I think that's important. To once again make the breakdown between a student and a customer. Like sure, the student or a customer just wants to come in, doesn't want to do the floor, doesn't want to, doesn't want to
What a
help.
move.
Yeah, doesn't want to help the sensei move. My sensei told me many stories of his sensei, my grand sensei, who would say things like, "Oh yeah, come on over, let's train." And so he'd go to his house and they'd start training for a little bit, and then he'd be like, "Oh, I got to I got to fix these fence posts." And so they'd, fix the fence posts, and
Right.
they did a couple beers, and
Right.
so mostly it turned out to be like maybe 60% doing yard work and stuff around his
Uh-huh.
house, or fixing lights or whatever, and
Yeah.
then maybe 40% training, well, maybe 30% training, another
And
10% drinking beer.
yeah. And even
So,
with, I mean, with my big rant, and I think what we're on the same page here. I do think that just as with anything, you will get out of it what you put into it, right? So if you want to have a closer relationship with your instructor and if you want to be more a part of the community of your school, I think those are all great things. I think if somebody has the option to do those things and they enjoy it, they should do it for sure. I think that what I get a bee in my bonnet. I don't know. rocking my shoe about is this sense of obligation, right? It's where the instructor, by the simple fact of their position in the school, has expectations about what their both their customers and students should be doing, right? And if, for example, this your story, that's a student. That's a student that goes over after hours, has some personal training, right? Maybe he paid for that. I mean, honestly, if I like paid for a private session for an hour and didn't and like ended up doing work for a half an hour of it, I wouldn't be terribly happy about it, even if I were a student, right? I don't know how many private sessions I'd be signing up for after that. But if the instructors just if they're just inviting me over and go, hey, I need to work out, why don't we mess around for a little bit and blah blah blah, then that's fantastic. Like that's wonderful. Um, I think it's this sense of I, as the head instructor, immediately deserve your respect, and you must do what I tell you to do. It's just like, nah, brother, that's not the way it works.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain level of sort of expected buy-in, right? When you
Yeah,
get, it, they're learning, you're teaching,
yeah,
so there's a little bit of, not fake it till you make it, but necessarily just buying like, okay, sure, go on. Um, the slippery slope for both sides is like, yeah, when an instructor kind of gets like, I have these people who are listening to me,
hmm
like my wife has said a couple of times of, like, oh, well, one of the reasons why you like teaching is because you get off on hearing you talk. I said, no, I have a
right.
podcast for that. That no one's on right now. Bummer. But anyway, so sure, yeah, that's sort of enticing. Yeah, you get a dopamine hit from that,
Mhm.
whatever. But for me at least, I'm really sort of cognizant of like, or I maybe not cognizant necessarily as, um, it feels weird to like ask people to do stuff for the dojo. Um,
Right,
and I'm really
right.
touched when someone just does stuff. Like
Yeah.
a few years ago, I've always sublet, and I have kind of said offhandedly, it'd be kind of cool to have kind of a portable like showman, the front of the dojo with all the certificates
Yeah.
and pictures and stuff. I said,
Yeah.
we could just, and one year for Christmas, at our, Christmas workout or whatever,
hmm
my guys got me one, a nice big 8 foot one. They'd print out pictures, and we figured out how to, and it's a Tommy mat to put it on. We put the weapons out, and I was like, oh, I mean, that really, I mean, I was like verklempt. I mean, that was really touching that two or three of my guys got together. I mean, it wasn't super expensive, I think. But I mean, it took a little forethought. They had to search it, and so that's not a tradition because traditionally we did not have anything. It was, we rolled out. This was the front of the class, and off we went. So and now that became sort of the tradition. At the beginning of the class, we would have to set that up. So that became a tradition, or maybe a dojo culture of like somebody had to get to class early, somebody had to break the stuff out. We sweep the floor and all that other stuff. Like that's sort of a tradition, um, that uh, did not start, or wasn't initiated with the class, but developed from the class because they found merit in that. And so, and then, but because of that, they found merit in supporting the dojo. They did that, and then now we have a tradition. And then now they made a tradition because now we have to support putting this thing out at the beginning of every class.
Right.
So and there were, in the last several years, I'd be there first, so it'd be me doing it, and like people would kind of show up like 5 minutes before class instead of 15 minutes
Yeah.
before class
Yeah.
because people work, people commute, people whatever.
Yeah. And maybe more than anything else, it's really about don't I don't know, I'm conflicted. I was gonna say, don't do the tradition just because it's the tradition. Do it because it makes
That's
sense.
important. Yes.
Now, at the same time, I do think that like ritual is important. For example, Um, I learned a long time ago that when you enter the threshold of the training area, you bow in.
Yeah.
It's a respect thing. But it's also, and as well as the clothes that you put on and things like that, it's also a mental prepping exercise, right? It's okay, this is the mode I'm in training mode now, and not world mode. So I'm getting my brain geared up, geared up for training mode.
Mhm.
And while you may not fully understand the tradition, and again, this is like bowing in, right?
Right.
If you're talking about, oh no, there is a tradition that you work in my garden every week for 6 months before you can become a full black belt. Like it's like, oh, wait a minute,
Hang
what
on, let me
now?
make a note on that.
Right.
6 weeks,
So
right?
right. So I think if it's not any inconvenience and there's no boundary violations or anything like that and it's easy enough to do, just do it. Like it's okay because
Yeah.
that stuff is fine. If it starts to
And
encroach on what makes you comfortable or not, then that's where you really do need to start questioning it.
right.
Because
Well, and a special little anecdote for that. Because yeah, I do that. I mean, whenever I go to another school, where whatever it is, yeah, when I
Mhm.
hit the door, I bow to walk in because that's what you do, right? In our world, and after 9/11, uh, when I was working in news, we did a story. Some local martial arts place was doing free self-defense lessons for like uh, airline personnel, stewardesses and pilots and whatnot.
Mhm.
Anyway, so we went to go cover it. Um, so and I had to go shoot it. So I went with the reporter and we went in there, and it was a judo place or taekwondo place. I can't remember what. Anyway, because the guy was doing a lot of throws and whatnot. Anyway, we walked in, and the reporter walked in, and actually she opened the door to do the thing, and I walked into the entryway, and then I walked into where the dojo was, and I had my tripod and my camera in my hand, and I bowed and walked in, and the instructor went, "You do martial arts?" And I was like, "Yeah." And
Yeah.
so because of that, we started talking, and then we were like, he let me do different angles, and he was like, "Oh, let me do that again."
Yeah.
He was kind of playing with the camera a little bit because he knew I knew how to shoot it anyway. But he was like,
Mhm.
so having that tradition baked in, I did it without thinking. I didn't do it because it's part of the act.
Right. It's just
Uh,
instinct.
yeah, and so that paid off.
Yeah.
Um, the I ran into a guy one time, and I could see he was wearing a short sleeve shirt, and I could see kanji, and we were talking about whatever, and I saw the thing, and I was like, "Are you doing martial arts?" And he's like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And I was like, and he's like, "Oh," and he's like, "Oh yeah, when you get your black belt, this is one of the transitions. When we get your black belt, you get the dojo name or style name or whatever tattooed somewhere on you." And I'm like, So like that's a tradition that you're muted. That yeah, I couldn't support. Hey, now you're unmuted. Maybe you're on the
Oh,
fly muted.
oh,
There you go.
I don't know.
Um, the yeah, so I was like, okay, but I didn't think about that at the time because we were talking
No,
about
no, no,
martial
but
arts. But that
that's exactly what we're talking about. It's just like, well, I get it that there are some traditions, and as you were talking, I think one of the things like the bow in and stuff like that, and we've talked about this with like forms and techniques, and I do think as a martial artist, some of your responsibility is to the system itself and
right,
maintaining the history, maintaining the culture of the system. um, Doing some of those things is also a responsibility of the martial artist. So sometimes you do stuff because it's tradition, and that's not nothing. Like those can be important parts of a community, right? Is to say, hey, we've all got this tattoo. How cool is it that we're all a part of this community? Blah, blah, blah. But I also think that if someone is shamed because they don't have the tattoo or they don't want to get the tattoo, then that's not cool either. You know, like those things, I don't know, in like I say, in a modern world, in my opinion, those things need to be maybe taken with more context, right? And so it's just I don't know. I
Yeah.
think what bugs me the most, I know one instructor. So he was a guy that wanted to start his own school, and what he was told was that when that he is going to be allowed to get students up to Greenbelt, and then those students after Greenbelt need to go back to the main dojo.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
That's what they call a franchise.
and I'm thinking, okay, so he trains them through Greenbelt and then has to like that. I don't know about that. That seems
Yeah.
kind of shady to me, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's the kind of thing that caused fractures in a lot of schools where they just go,
Right.
you know
But
what,
now
man, I'm out.
here's the question. Did this person question go like, why?
Yeah.
And did the instructor go, well, since time immemorial, passed down from Mount Fuji, this was the way
This is
here's
the
the
way
ancient,
of the way.
yes, here's the
My
ancient skull.
right.
We had
Yeah.
I had a colleague, friend, co-conspirator, call it what you will. Anyway, he was telling me about some of the stuff that they did in their group, and he was saying, like, oh well, one of the things that you're supposed to do before black belt is you go into the woods for like a week or
Yep.
a period of time, and you meditate, and
Mm,
you do la 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 la, and then you have to
right.
write a thing up about what
Right.
you
You have to
train.
hunt with your bare hands and your teeth.
Well, maybe not so much that, but and I was like, oh, and they're like, oh yeah, it's like this. The samurai used to do that, and I'm like, okay, you're in an Okinawan system, supposedly. That's some round eye crap that somebody pulled out of their butt to try and make it sound all, you
I
know,
love it. That's some
floofy.
round eye crap.
Oh, I've said it before,
Yeah.
and I'll
Yeah.
say it again. It's like round eyes screwed up everything.
Yeah.
When doughy white guy, or just I
Yeah.
mean, it's as much as uh, you know, I don't get off on a rant here, but for as
What?
much as the good things happen, because, and this is mostly just talking from an Okinawan art
Hmm.
standard of like, yes, karate came up from Okinawa, and the GIs, and they spread it and they built it up, and now supported people back in Okinawa, and yada yada yada. I get all
Yeah.
that. I said, but the problem was, in my opinion, uh, and no one's watching, so I can say what I want. The you know, a lot of guys trained in Okinawa for a couple of years. People have heard me say this before, so they're probably sick of it. And then they left Okinawa, and then they started schools, and they taught people everything they had learned up to like first degree, second degree, whatever they were when they left, or less in some cases. And they had nothing else to teach them because they didn't stick around long enough to learn it, and they haven't gone back. So they had to fill it in. So that's where a lot of the crucible crap and calisthenics and any of the outlandish stuff,
I
a lot of
will
that
say,
martial art stuff. The
yeah.
martial part of martial arts
Yeah.
came mostly from military guys that got
Hmm.
back to the States, and not all.
Yeah.
This is a broad brush, but uh, so that was an opportunity that somebody took to go like, okay, I got to try and make this seem more frou-frou than it is,
Right.
because
Ooh.
they didn't really have. And my contention is whoever this was full of shit. And oh, there goes our rating. Um, and they were like, oh, I trained in many arts and then I created this system. No, you're pulling stuff out of whatever. And so they heard the story and it sounded cool. They pulled it into their system, federation, and call it what you will. That became a tradition. And so yeah, so like now that's a requirement that sort of thing. I was like, well, yeah, but that wasn't. It's like I'm doing this thing over here. I pull this other thing in to justify this stuff. It just train and do your stuff,
Yeah.
So and
And
now that becomes
like
to your
even
spot.
right,
Yeah.
even to the point of like, oh, as part of this, go out into the woods and meditate for hours or whatever, blah blah blah. I'm not saying that that exercise isn't a good one.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of people might benefit from just going and chilling in the woods for a few hours, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that two things. One, that should be pretty clear when you join the school to go, hey, if you get all the way through this stuff, by the way, this is the expectation.
Hmm.
Like a tattoo or a night in the woods or some kind of crucible. I mean, I went through a crucible myself for my black belt test, and it is set up and everybody knows it. It's like infamous in the school. Everybody knows it is meant to be mentally difficult, right? Not even physically difficult, but I mean physically difficult, yes, but it's also meant to really test your mental fortitude more than anything else. Now, I look back on that event, and oftentimes when I face something hard in life, I go, well, I made it through my black belt test, so this is easy, right? And it gave me that context. It gave me that lens to look at stuff. And so it was valuable. But there's two things. One, I knew it. I knew it was coming. I knew it was a thing, and I bought
Right.
into that, which was fine. The other thing is that my instructor in adjust, it's not the same challenge for everybody.
Right.
He adjusts that based on what he thinks the capabilities of the student are. And he has known them for at least a few years. He knows that what they're capable of, and he sets the ladder of that challenge up for that person, right? So all that being said, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you want to do those things, I'm not saying that those things won't benefit your life.
Hmm.
But if you don't want to do them, you are in under no obligation to do them, right? Like that should, if you go, well, this is not something I don't want to go sit in the forest for 4 hours. That's gonna freak me out. I'm gonna have panic attacks while I'm there. This is not, and it's like, no, then don't do it. That's not
Right.
cool. You shouldn't do that, you know? So again, it's this level of really checking in with yourself to go, I don't have to do this just because somebody told me to.
Right.
Like, no, that's I'm not okay with this, and I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
And in fact, like if you're in a Brazilian jiu-jitsu place and you're a female and you're not comfortable rolling with other guys, don't do it. Like if they say, well, no, I'm sorry. Everyone rolls with everyone here, and that's just the bottom line, then go somewhere else. You don't have to, and we're gonna lose our
I don't
rating
know.
again. You don't have to
Yeah.
put up with shit from anybody, right?
Well, this is
Like
true.
you really don't.
But I would. I don't know. I would have a pushback on that because I mean, you don't know what you're going to be messing with, and chances are, especially if you're a woman, let's say, you're probably going to
Yeah,
be rolling attacked by a dude.
right.
So, so you might
And
want
in
to.
my opinion, the coach or instructor would position it as, well, you don't have to. Nobody's going to force you to. Nobody's going to look down on you. You're not going to be shamed for it.
Mhm.
But to let you know what I
Okay.
would like to do in this school is maybe push your comfort zone a little bit, and maybe throughout time that you're here, you can become more and more comfortable with doing that, because what we're trying to do is force you out of your comfort zone in a safe place so
Right.
that when you're not in a safe place.
See, I can't push back when you start getting unreasonable.
Right. No, but I mean, but that's the thing, is like sometimes it's okay to have that conversation. And sometimes an instructor going, well, it's this way because I said so, is not good enough. It's just not good enough. You
Well, and part of that is, as an instructor myself, for whatever level, is having that introspection of going like, okay, now how can it? Because it's like the end goal
Mhm.
is, there's, yeah, I've run into instructors who are like, I teach what I teach, and if people don't want it, they can go elsewhere.
Right.
And I'm kind of that way too.
Eh,
It's I
meh,
tell people like
that's cool.
when they come in, I go like, if you're looking for like rank and you want to be a black belt in 2 years, this is not your place. You
Yeah.
know, and there's
And
some gates that are set in,
yeah,
but you should also be kind of going, okay, you know, an instructor shouldn't be the same kind of an instructor they are 5 years, down the road, and
and
2 or 3 years.
you're not the same instructor for every student either,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're going to be
because
constantly evaluating, because
right,
everybody's different,
right.
there's an
Somebody
average
might have a
and
physical problem where they can't
right.
kick above their waist or something like that, or whatever the case might be.
Sure.
And so I don't know. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is like, well, how do you pick a good school? And my big thing with picking a good school is alignment of goals, right?
Mhm.
Are your goals aligned with the goals of the style, the other students, and the instructor?
Yeah.
Because if you get that alignment, it doesn't matter what style you're in. It doesn't, like, none of the other stuff matters if your goals are aligned. And if there's not total honesty from the instructor's perspective about what the goals of the school are,
Mhm.
then you can't align those goals,
Right.
right? So it's kind of like if you go in and go, well, self-defense is the only thing I want to do. That's my primary thing. I just want to be safe when I'm walking on the street downtown, and that's the thing I want. Meanwhile, you're a taekwondo or a tai chi teacher, you might go, this is not exactly what you're going to learn a lot of stuff. You're going to learn some of it here. But we're not exactly tuned to align with those goals necessarily, right?
Yeah.
I can maybe do some private work with you and move you in that direction, but maybe it's not exactly what we're here for. At the same time, if somebody says, I just want to get some exercise, I want to make some friends, I don't have a ton of time for this thing, but I just think it's good for me and healthy and all that jazz. Well, to go through a crucible to get your black belt doesn't make sense for that person then, or to force them to get a tattoo, or it's just like
Yeah.
those goals don't align with what the goals of that person are.
Yeah.
So
I think, yeah, part of it exactly is the goals is like, what you're, so that's, kind of one of the things that would I also wanted to talk about was like, like things like, I mean, there's, probably people from your line of martial arts and whatnot, or like, training in a gi, training with a belt, training,
yes,
whatever is like, that's a tradition, and they're like, well, but
right.
depending on how far you go back, it's not really a tradition. It's a relatively new tradition. How
I have
important is
found
that?
that.
Yeah, like how important is
Yeah,
is this thing to the end goal of punching somebody in the face?
right,
It's like what and we've talked about it before, like getting in a gi kind of puts you in the
right.
mindset, putting the
Yeah.
belt on them.
And then
Um,
you talk to old school guys about a belt and they go, it's to hold your pants up,
right, right,
right? So all the respect and reverence and sacredness that we put into this is my glorious belt and blah 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 blah. It's just like there's none of that back there, or there's very very little of it. Where it's it's and that's not to say that there's not some reverence for it, but it's that which it represents. It's not the thing itself, and they all
yeah.
recognize it and they all know that, and all this stuff that
Well, I got
that
a I think I'm pretty sure I told you about this. I got in trouble with a group of martial artists because we were in a thing and they were talking about belts, about having a new. I was actually just talking to somebody about this today
yeah,
about having they had a new belt from Schredo. Uh, like this is like my belt, right? So
okay,
they had a new belt from Schredo, it's high quality belt, blah 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 blah, and I guess for whatever reason they decided they needed to get a new belt, and they were saying, what's the best way to break it in? And
Oh, cool.
I took the road of martial artists from time immemorial, and I said, just train. Because I
Right,
mean, I was like, I got mine. I mean,
right.
this is my third belt. My first belt disappeared in a move. My first belt was literally getting ready to fall apart, and I got this one. I don't know, like 8 or 9 years ago or whatever.
Right.
Um, had it on, off we went. Um, and I was like, well, just train because I mean, the Shredos are good belts. They'll break in. And I got freaking roasted by people, like, like, oh, he was asking
Tie
a
it to your
legitimate
bumper so they
question,
could
and
drag it behind their car.
yeah, and I was like, just put it on and train. I mean, I bought that,
I'll tell you what,
I got,
if I see a fourth degree with a brand new belt, I'm like, that guy is
well,
very serious.
well,
You know what I mean?
to be clear, this was my new fourth degree belt that I got.
But I'm sure you'll have to get
So
another one to replace that,
no,
right?
no, no, because we're not
Yeah.
a McDojo. We just stitch on
Just
and
add
well,
another. Yeah.
quite honestly, anyone in my federation that knows me that may be listening later or watching later knows that there'll probably be no more of these. But anyway, um, that's
But
neither here nor there.
yes.
The important part of this is like I just got like, and I was like, well, because I mean, just if you just tie it, and people are like, well, sometimes it comes off, and that throws me off, and da, da, da. And so anyway, so as I back slowly out of the conversation, um,
I mean, put it
I,
in the
I
washing
was
machine for a couple
I was
cycles.
I was I was thinking, no, you can't do that. That's the
Oh
soul.
my God, the spirit will be washed out of your belt then.
Exactly. See, so I'm kind of like going down the,
Uh-huh.
I'm threading the
Uh-huh.
needle on this one of hypocrisy and cynicism. So because what happened was like I got that, but at the same time, like literally at the same time, my two seniors got their new flashy belts from Okinawa, and I was like,
Hmm.
tie those on and let's see how long it takes for you to break those in. Like
Yes.
just like
It was
this
like
is
a week of training and it's good to
a
go.
small simple. Well, I mean, it took a little while. I mean,
Did it?
it breaks loose and stuff like that.
Yeah, it does.
But like part of me was kind of, so here's my thing, and this is why I think it ties into the topic at hand, was because one of the things that they were talking about, this band of, scrappy underdog martial artists that, are desperately trying to preserve the
Right.
history of Okinawan martial arts and yada yada yada, was looking for a way to shortcut, oh,
Wait.
to get to the thing. So I was like, okay, well, is that
No, no, no,
traditional? No, traditional is you tie it on and you train. So, you don't sprinkle
no.
water
Hang it
on
on
it and then do it
to
every day,
loosen it up.
because I mean, people will go. I mean, and there'll be people who go like, well, yes, um, when I trained in Okinawa, that's what they told me to do. I don't know. I don't think so. I've never heard that
Well,
before.
and was your belt handmade by a small Asian woman? Like, I mean, come on.
Maybe
How
I
far are
think
we
it's
gonna
stitch.
go?
Yeah, well, but I mean, yeah. So the thing is like, exactly. So I mean, belts are a relatively recent thing. So if you
Hmm.
jump the fence over and go like, well,
Right.
yeah, 80 years ago or whatever, people weren't wearing belts. They were just wearing, whatever. So, but then that ties into the whole gi,
Yeah.
uniform, blah, 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 how that goes on. But it was like, it was that kind of thing of like, okay, well, if you want to be traditional and teach a traditional art,
Don't wear a belt at all.
well, but you're also wanting a way to shortcut the thing that we always say
Hmm.
about just, so it's like,
Right. Right. Yeah.
so the tradition is the tradition wearing the belt, or is the tradition, uh,
Wearing the belt out.
looking good in the belt, and,
Right.
I was telling somebody about this today because we were talking, somehow this came
Yeah.
up, and I was talking to a goju buddy of mine, and I was saying how my grand sensei, he had his belt was knotty and, all torn up and whatever, but when he would spar with one of the senior guys, and it was freaking hard. I mean, we'd watch him, and very often his belt would come undone, and he would just keep going. He would just sweep it out of
Right.
the
You pick
way,
it off.
or if they were if they ended up on the
Yeah.
ground, he would like grab it and fucking try and time. It's
Yeah.
like it's gone, it's gone. It's like
Right.
it's, and so so the tradition is you have to wear your belt, and if your belt isn't properly tied, you know, you have to stop and tie it because you know should that be should that be ignored? It's like if your belt comes off during training, that shouldn't throw you off. Just let it go. You know, and oh, then your belt just touched the floor. I'm like, okay, come on. So, it's like, does that get you where you want to go? Or is
Yeah.
that a manufactured thing that is getting in the way of your training?
It's like I know, don't touch the floor kind of thing, right? In many traditions, you don't let the weapon touch the floor. You can't, if you have in kung fu, at least, if you have a spear, for example, you don't let the spear touch the floor. You're never resting on it or anything like that.
And see, so how much of that is a tradition, and how much of that is
Right,
just, weapons,
right,
awareness, and
right,
being in control of what you have the whole time, that has
right.
become a tradition, and
Yeah.
it serves a purpose, but it's couched in, BS.
Hmm. Right,
So,
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then so then whereas we as a martial artist, like where do we go? Like, nah, that's not important. The concept is important.
Yeah.
Is the application important?
Yeah.
That sort of thing and I
Hmm.
think that's, and then as what I like to hear from our listeners later, because
Yeah.
no one's you knock it off for a couple of weeks and people don't log in.
Right. Jeez, come on.
Is name if you're an instructor, name some traditions or customs or whatever that you let go of, and perhaps why. And then if you're a student, maybe some things completely anonymously, so your sensei doesn't find out about it, unless it's very specific. Is some traditions that are like, why do we do this? And what, who is it helping? Uh, it, it I've over the years I've been kind of looking at like, I've had the question of like, if I left my federation or my system, my whatever, what would I keep? What would I throw away? Because I mean, I think everyone, when they train for a while, look at their system. I'm sure you look back at your system and stuff you trained with for a while,
Yep.
and are going like, I wouldn't teach that.
And I think, one of the things I thought of is that maybe what it is that those traditions should should never be casually dismissed and never be blindly followed.
Ooh,
And
nice one.
maybe that's where kind of the sweet spot is don't just dismiss something casually because it's a tradition, right? I think many like modern styles dismiss traditions simply because it's a tradition,
Yeah,
and maybe they don't understand the deeper meaning or the deeper lesson that they're trying to get out of it. At the same time, maybe if it's something that you think is inhibiting your training or just genuinely doesn't serve a purpose or whatever, your training is your training. You
right,
can do it however you want to do it. And so again, don't just casually dismiss stuff. It's probably there for a reason.
right.
um, at the same time, don't just follow it blindly because it is a tradition. I don't know if you've heard, there's a there's a story about uh, there's a group of monkeys and they put a banana in a specific spot, and every time a monkey tries to get the banana, they're punished for getting the banana. But all the monkeys are punished, right? So
Oh,
the monkeys learn real fast, don't go get that banana. Well, they start cycling new monkeys into the group one at a time. And every time they go to get the banana, they're punished for it by the other monkeys.
oh,
So eventually, there are no monkeys that have ever been punished by getting the banana, but the monkeys still aren't getting the banana because it's now just part of the culture of the group that
right.
says, if you try to do this, I'm going to punish you, right?
Hmm.
And they're doing it thoughtlessly without thinking, well, wait a minute, why are we doing this again? Because nobody knows anymore.
Right.
Right? So I think, again, just following something mindlessly, that's not good either. But just dismissing it casually, nobody should be doing that at the same time. So maybe that's how,
Yeah.
just give people like a framework for, this is how you can think about this stuff rather than a rule.
Right. Well, and, that kind of ties back to just, like not doing like Xerox rule, right? Where you're not just copying. That's again, having a conversation with a guy today online about people doing seminars and doing like applications and seminars and stuff like that. And we were talking about there's value about people making money off running seminars and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and going like myself, who's available for weddings, bar mitzvahs, and seminars near you, teach
There you
captivation.
go.
But
Big bar mitzvah guy.
is hey now hey the he was saying like I said, well, I was saying like I have no problem with people who you know, make some money off like doing seminars, going to dojo and going, because they've done the analysis, right? Like maybe they,
Mm-hmm.
like everyone else, like if you want someone who throws really well, go to a judo school or something like that because they throw really well. So if you want to teach your students how to throw really well, you can take the time or you can contract it. And so, um, and me and the guy I was talking to, we got a little catty, and we're like, if someone doesn't want to do the analysis and doesn't really want to take the time to learn that aspect of their art, they bring somebody in who does,
Mm-hmm.
um, and to whatever level, it's just I think there's merit to bringing other instructors in to your
Oh yeah,
school
for sure. I do too.
because
I really do.
they enhance by
Yeah.
if they're savvy instructors, they will try and enhance what you're doing,
Yeah.
anyway. Um so but they haven't analyzed my point is like these instructors you know haven't analyzed that component of their system. Is that bad? Is that good? Chances are if they haven't, they probably don't. And I like just uh like duty and throw like when a couple of years ago when out of the bunkai and applications work that like Ian and other people were doing, this next wave of people of like, okay, what's the next thing that we can, Tagumi, oh, Okinawan wrestling, oh, everyone's Tagumi, and so then there were people who were kind of going down that road.
Yeah.
There are a chunk of people who are going like, yeah, that's there. We've known it's always been there. So move on. But there are other people who probably through no fault of their own didn't know about it because their instructor didn't know about it because their
Right.
instructor didn't know about it because their instructor didn't know about it. Uh, Traditionally, was it part of their system? Maybe, but traditionally in Okinawan arts in general, yeah, that was there. It was a component that was there. It's like
Yeah.
to what degree it was there, questionable. Whatever.
Probably
But
different for different schools.
probably different for different schools, and so it dropped off. And so this guy taught this guy
Yeah.
taught this gal and taught this person. Keep it neutral, uh,
That's right.
and it fell off. The
Yeah.
understanding fell off. So, but and that conversation was like, I think it's okay for people to like kind of farm that out. I think it's okay for people to have that as a side hustle. I don't think it's okay for those people to make that a career because then I don't I think they're specializing instead of being generalists. so I think we all should be generalists and then specializing. But anyway, so it's like he's like, well, so is that a tradition? Does that become a tradition now? I've seen that where like, no,
Right.
that is becoming tradition. Like, well, now we're gonna really kind of focus on this as well as our other stuff, you know. And like in my system, I think maybe our tradition is, the Hakatsu or white crane sort of thing runs all through our system. You know, there are people in our system that really focus on that more than everyone else. But I have over the years run into people and they're just like, well, I want to see the white crane. I'm like, well, it's freaking everywhere. I can't, I don't have, the crane
Right.
technique. I have a bunch of techniques that are crane inspired. So, and it
Right.
inspired. So, it's like, so, but then, people will like turn and they will make that their tradition and they will make that the enhance. And it's like,
Hmm.
you know, do you, so then what do you have to ignore in order to keep that? Or can you
Yeah.
keep it
Yeah. Yeah.
all?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. That's very true too.
and then your curriculum blows out. It's it's
Right.
when it comes to is maybe tradition is a focus point, and so it's like
Yes.
how hard you focus on it is like that's where the thought is like we do this a lot is it, core to what we're doing,
Right.
or is it something we're doing because there's a lot of it,
Right.
you know, like,
Yeah.
like my wife is like, how come you have so many gi? I was like, well, because I mean, we're kind of rough on our gi. And now I've got four, two white ones, two black ones, something formal, for nice events, and then, a little sassy black number that I wear when I'm lazy.
Nice.
But like, so like there'll be
Dinner parties and whatnot.
right. So like for I was training with a guy a few years ago, and he came to the dojo one day, and I was wearing white pants and a black top. And he goes, "Oh, are you doing kabuto today? Weapons?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "Well, you're wearing a kabuto gi." And I'm like, "No, I'm just wearing a gi." And he goes, "Well, white pants and a black top. That's kabuto." And I realized when he said that, like, it was like one of those like movie flashbacks where it goes shh into my eye, and I see all these videos of kabuto people, and they're all wearing white pants and a black top. And like, so that I don't know if that's an official traditional.
Right.
I just know that's a lot of kabuto guys wear
Right.
that. And so I'm like, oh, so in his mind, that's a kabuto uniform
Right. But
and can only be
you're not gonna change halfway through your class because you're gonna be teaching Kabuto the second half
right.
of the class.
Exactly. Take off the white top, put on the black
Right, put
top,
on the
off we go.
right, exactly.
So
Yeah.
there's that kind of stuff where it kind of like, I mean, it's not detrimental, but it
Right.
in my scattered opinion, it's kind of one of those things is what you're kind of locked in is like I can't. Well, yeah, I've said this before, and of course, this is a fictional um, example, but in as we were talking about a couple weeks ago with Andrew uh, about the movie Red Belt,
Yeah.
and at the end of the big fight scene, he goes to jujitsu it was Jean-Jacques Machado, and he was going to the ring when the altercation started, and he stopped and he like kicked his shoes off, and while he was kicking his shoes off, um, uh, Kerry like goes and gets him because it's like he's well, I gotta take my shoes off because I'm getting ready to fight. And I've said that in a lot of times when we doing going to dojo and we're talking about application work and stuff like that is like, you know, if hang on, I gotta get my gi on before you attack me. So,
Right.
that's the sort of thing. This is, the oversimplification of what we're talking about. It kind of is like I have to be in my gi. Well, what's the gi represent? As we've mentioned,
Yes.
get you in your head,
Prepping and yep.
da, da, da. So that's important. But if you can't do it unless you're in a gi,
Not good.
it's
Not good.
yeah, it's like if that's your mental like what's the thing they talk about uh it's apocryphal, at best. Somebody who was a law enforcement officer that trained and they would do disarms and then give the thing back and disarm.
Right, right,
And somebody
right.
says like, well, we trained because that one time we heard somebody say that, they
Right. I disarmed somebody and then I gave him the gun back.
it's like, because that's
Okay.
tradition. So, and then, so
Right.
then the tradition is, and, when I heard it the first time, I kind of thought about was somebody said like when they do takedowns or when they're doing, whatever in
They
class and they
help
do
somebody
take,
up afterwards.
they don't, they specifically
Oh,
don't
they
help
don't.
somebody up.
Right.
And
Right.
because, then you reach
Right.
down in the back, and it's like, well, how many times does that happen? What's the sample size on that? Because I'm thinking it's like, you know,
And what are
it's
the
like,
chances, really, if you're in that situation, you throw somebody to the ground, your instinct is going to be so strong that you're not going to just be running away,
right,
but instead you're going to help them up? Like,
right. But by that same token, the joke that I always do when we're doing stuff with grappling or whatever, and I say like the ultimate killer move against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person is when they get you in a hold or a lock or whatever, you tap and they let
just
you go
tap.
immediately. It's like a
Right.
pressure point strike. They oh,
Right.
and it's
And
like,
I
well,
wonder that may be that very well may be apocryphal too. Like when your
right.
adrenaline is pumping and you're in that situation, you're not going to let somebody go just because they tap on you. You know what I mean?
Or
Like,
will you? Because you've trained like that so much.
and maybe,
So
right. But maybe in those cases, like, okay, we're going to train today and don't help your partner up. Let's just see how instinctual that is. See how hard
there
that
you go.
is for you to fight the urge to help them up. My guess would be is you throw them down and you're like, get up.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as strong as I don't know. Maybe because I'm not a judo guy, like I don't do it all day every day, but yeah, I
Right.
don't know if that instinct is so strong that you're actually gonna like give up your own safety for doing it.
Right.
I'm skeptical, let's
Yeah,
say.
because I'm thinking if it's a defense scenario and I lucky enough to get a nice clean throw on somebody, I'm
Right?
booking,
I'm
right?
booking.
So
And if I
so
get a nice choke on somebody and they start tapping me, I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm
no,
not letting you out. I'm choking you out.
I'm doing it until you stop tapping, and then
I know you're up. I know you're still awake.
disclaimer: don't do that at home, kids. Um,
Right.
if they tap, let them go.
Let him
Uh,
go.
that's a good. We're we're almost on our
We're about right on it.
second half hour of our hour half hour. Is here's our challenge to you, the clearly Karate Cafe listening audience, because no one's freaking watching. Is today this time? We've had a few people. So anyway, and we're going to touch on that before we go. But and the challenge is this: next time you go to your class, even you, Dan, uh, go. What is challenge yourselves? Maybe challenge your instructor, or if your instructor challenges your students, go like today we're going to go. It's going to be opposite day. Instead of
There you
putting on
go.
uniform, we're going in our street gi. Instead of
Yeah.
barefoot, we're going to put our shoes on.
Yeah.
What I know,
I think,
your
yeah,
name your thing.
I
Well,
think a tradition maybe that has been lost is experiment and play,
right,
right? Like it is not a sin to do some practice without your gi on.
right,
Like that's okay. Experiment, play. I actually think the old school guys did a lot more of that than most people think. Because
yeah,
they weren't any different than we are, you know. They didn't they weren't religious about their martial arts. They they were martial artists. They explored for the same reason that we explore. They like doing this stuff for the same reason that we like doing it, right? Like explore, play. Like this, it should be play. You should experiment.
right, yeah. I mean, it's I've suggested this to many people, especially being up here in Canada now. Like telling people like do your uh, got a good friend here, and he has a lot of outdoor classes now that the weather's nice and stuff like that. But everyone's in their gi, and there are
Hmm.
some people that go barefooted, and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go barefoot. There was a time when I used to have nice, when I lived in Hawaii, I went barefoot all the time. Anyway, it's like it's like okay, so I have to be in my gi with my belt on to do karate.
Right.
And it's like, or we could just be out here
Goofing
and
around.
whatever we're wearing. And it's not a detriment. It doesn't take away. I mean, it's a karate class. It's legit. They bow in, they do the whole thing. But, it's like, it's okay. Well, then the next time, have everyone just show up in whatever you wear. Like, or I would say, let's have a winter class where everyone's got in their winter boots
Yeah.
on and their
Yeah.
jackets and their whatever. And let's see how that all works out,
Let's
you
go out in the
know?
snow and spar a little bit.
Right.
You
And
know?
just, and do all this, but so to a smaller bubble, it's like, yeah, just go into your class and instead of bowing when you walk in, just smooth ass, just walk in,
Just
whatever,
walk in.
you
Right.
know, kick your shoes off or put your shoes on, whatever. It's just
Yeah.
do something and see how that changes. Does it change, your quality of training, what the training means, you know, uh, and it's not as a challenge to break down the mores and whatnot. It's just to go like, well, is that important? And not to be all Bruce Lee, where take what is important, and or take
You think of that. Yep.
is like, oh, that is important because I feel is it's like it's I think that's an important thing to you know
To carry
for
forward or
for my
continue on.
training, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
and to be clear, like there's a whole, especially again from the Okinawan branch, and I'm sure from Chinese branches and everything else, is like
Hmm.
there's a cultural component of martial arts that I think is very important,
I do
and
too.
I think understanding it and being respectful of it and embracing it and whatnot is important.
Absolutely.
but to the point where you're sort of the doughy white guy walking around in a kimono,
Right.
it's like,
Right.
okay, but you're not, you're a white guy, and
Right. Right.
that is
You're
an
not seeing the
affectation.
forest for the trees kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that is an
Yeah.
affectation. That is not a onboarding or whatever. It's the understanding like where your system came from and the culture that it came from and
Hmm.
whatever is important. And probably in the I don't know, probably maybe in the 80s or 90s, there was a push of, all the reality-based martial arts people who, you know, they
Right.
they they appreciated
Forms are
the
stupid. We hate it
application.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the technique and everything is great,
Yeah.
but the cultural part is not. And some of them got pretty you know, like, oh, those dirty jabs, kind of. And it's like you took so that's one of the things where you took it and you stripped away arguably all that.
I think the loss of forms, for example, in a lot of these arts is a real detriment to the art. I really do. I know that a lot of people don't see a practical use of forms. I see an incredibly practical use of forms. Maybe not practical in the sense of this is how I'm going to punch somebody, but it provides, in my opinion, the way I see it, is it is sort of like the dictionary or encyclopedia of your art, right?
Right.
Where if you look up a word in the dictionary, you're not going to get all of the context and everything that that word means, but you'll know it's a word in the language, right? And just like when you break apart a form, you can identify the words and phrases and basically what they're obviously more explanation or more exploration needs to be done on each of those
Mhm.
individual things, but at least it gives you a library of the techniques that form the system.
Right. But
It's
and
those kinds of traditions, right?
yeah, and see, I think part of that I mean that's we're kind of late in the show on this, but like part of that is the like where I think that the lack of understanding and analysis by some people
Hmm.
let it
Yeah.
go. They were not taught by someone who understood who understood, and so yeah, and that's
They just
when
said this is dumb. I don't want to train this
yes,
anymore.
and so this is where some of our practical
Yeah.
karate brethren and sister and all these other people are born out of uh, folks that they were taught by somebody who was taught by somebody who didn't get it, who didn't understand it, who
Right.
didn't learn it, who didn't, for whatever reason.
And they just copied it by rote.
And
Yeah.
they taught a bunch of people, and they taught a bunch of people, and they taught a bunch of people, and then somebody in here was like, "This doesn't make sense."
Hmm.
And because they didn't pay attention to the tradition, they sniffed around a little bit, and then they started putting the dots together, and
Hmm.
so and sometimes they got to burn everything down and rebuild their house, and that's fine. Okay, fine.
Okay.
That's not too much work, but um, uh, anyway, I mean, I just think it's a slippery slope. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think what it boils down to is, well, as you said, way back in the beginning of this, a half hour ago, was what is important, what
Yeah.
what gets you where you want to go,
Yeah.
as a student, as an instructor. It's like what you want to uh, impart,
What are
I
your
guess.
goals? Yeah. Well, yeah. What do
Yeah,
you want to
yeah, that's
impart?
true.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I really want to impart that which I have been taught and kind of support this lineage and whatnot that I am lucky
Hmm.
enough to have been a part of all this
Hmm.
time. How best can I do that
Yeah.
without being wrong, without, or tearing anything down? And, just
Right.
it's like that's the lonely path that I walked in
There you go.
you know. But anyway, for all you people, absolutely. Oh, and so as we were mentioning earlier, you and I
Oh, yeah.
forgot. So we want, we're thinking about maybe bopping this bad boy over to YouTube. Which, if you're watching us right now, you're probably watching on
You might
YouTube.
you might be
You might,
watching us on YouTube.
yeah. And because of that, we need how many subscribers?
50.
We need 50, and we currently have 36. It's there.
So
So,
close.
if you want to support the tradition, the ancient tradition of the first martial arts podcast,
Right.
and get on yet another social platform,
That's right.
uh,
Traditionally, our viewers go out and subscribe to YouTube for us.
That's right, and do it
Don't
reverently.
question it.
Don't question
How
it, just
dare
do
you?
it.
How dare you?
Because if you do, then we get to,
Expand
verbal
our
vomit
audience.
on YouTube for those of
Right.
you
We
who are
get
on
to make more people suffer.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Live. We post the shows there, later. So, but why when they can get it fresh?
Fresh, hot,
They can
fresh,
be
hot
let.
off the YouTube.
That's right. They can be let down in real time as opposed to
That's
a
right.
delay.
Their
Why wait?
disappointment doesn't have to be delayed.
And why would you not want other people to be just as sad as you are to waste of this half hour?
Is appointment the opposite of disappointment?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I
Okay.
guess so. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
And if you'd like to make us gruntled, then
Gruntled.
by all
I am
means,
I am fully gruntled right now.
I'm fully gruntled, and I'll be even more when I watch that number of people
That's right.
bouncing up.
Tick up.
Anywho, I think that's a good place to put a pin in this half hour. Dan,
Absolutely.
always good talking to you,
Always good to talk to you, Paul. Fun
and we will talk to you.
conversation.
Important conversation, and we will talk to some of you again very soon.